Welcome to the Benefits Executive Roundtable, hosted by Dorothy Cociu, President of Advanced Benefit Consulting. Dorothy is a nationally recognized benefits and compliance consultant and group health broker. Here, you will watch and listen to industry experts who will break down the latest trends in employee benefits, healthcare reform, state and federal legislative and regulatory activities, all designed to empower executive decisions. We are proud to bring to you all new video podcasts. We hope that you enjoy your new video podcast format, and please forgive any audio or video imperfections. Thank you for viewing and listening. Meet Advanced Benefit Consulting, an award-winning boutique benefits broker and compliance consulting firm that offers comprehensive benefits and compliance consulting. We offer personalized service and the ability to work directly with the owners. We invite you to contact us or connect with us on LinkedIn and include us in your broker consultant search.
Welcome back to the Benefits Executive Roundtable. I'm your host, Dorothy Cociu, President of Advanced Benefit Consulting. We took a break over the holidays, as we always do, but now we're back to finish up Season 7. And I want to welcome back my guests today. They've all been here previously. First, we have Adriana Mendieta. She is an Avid AI Agile user and cyber insurance agent. And we have Eric Barricklow, a successful Chief Information Security Officer and technologist with decades of experience in cybersecurity, incident response, and operations in aerospace, defense, state, municipal, government agencies. He's also the owner of Stellar Cyber Solutions, as well as the Chief Information Security Officer for the city of Long Beach, California. I don't know how you have time to be here with us today, but thank you, Eric, for being here. Really appreciate it. Lastly, but not least, of course, is Miguel Villegas, and he's known by most of us as Mike. And he brings a deep expertise in AI security, governance, and risk assessment, helping organizations not understand just how to use AI, but how to do it safely, responsibly, and defensively, an evolving threat and regulatory landscape. It's going to be an insightful, practical, and probably at times eye-opening conversation about AI security, user liability, and what safe use really means in today's environment. And I have to tell you, I'm so excited about today because what a powerhouse roundtable panel we have today. This is exactly the reason that I started the podcast Benefits Executive Roundtable. Basically, my thought was to bring together great minds to discuss really important topics of the day. And that's exactly what we're doing here today with this absolutely wonderful panel. So again, thanks to each of you for joining me today, and thanks to our audience for coming back. Let's get into this because I know it's so important. And that's what I have with me today, these three wonderful guests and all friends of mine. So I want to say thank you again for being with me. As I said, you've been here before, and I'm just really super excited about bringing together these great minds to talk about this amazingly fascinating, but also somewhat scary topic that we're talking about today. So thanks you guys for being with me today. Let's get this thing started. What do you think?
You're welcome. Thanks for having us, Dorothy. Always a pleasure to be here and talk about the great topics that we can talk about with brilliant minds like yourself. And we got Mike and Eric here. Guys, I've told you before, I love the way your wheels spin. So I am looking forward to this next hour and what we get to talk about with regards to AI and liability and security and all the wonderful things that it can encompass.
Hello, Dorothy. Yeah, welcome. Thank you for having me back from an AI perspective. It's no longer an emergency technology, it's an embedded one. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, especially how our users and our businesses are using AI and some of the outputs that it is performing. The reality shifts AI from a productivity tool to a security and a liability kind of surface. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation with the rest of these guests, your panel, your powerhouse panel.
Yeah. And Mike, thank you for being here. Really great to see you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this podcast and this conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you, Adriana, and Eric, talk about a topic that is becoming impossible to ignore. I'm just going to say this right off the gate. Artificial intelligence is not coming. It's already inside your organization, whether leadership approved it or not.
Yep.
So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
And that's actually a really great place to start with this, because that was going to be my opening comment. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. We can't put on our masks and pretend it doesn't exist in the world today. It's here. It's all around us. And it was interesting because I was looking at my calendar and to see when you guys were with me last and so forth. And it reminded me that just a little over 2 years ago, Eric and Adriana were part of this, at the time, new technology. We did an Advanced Benefit Consulting did a lunch and learn, and you guys were in person with us, and you did some amazing demos for our audience. And I remember, Adriana, you showed a bunch of people how to use it was ChatGPT at that time. And Eric, you did these amazing, you created this wonderful presentation in front of everybody in like no time. And they were just so, amazed by this technology because it was pretty new then. It was really, really new then. And now it's everywhere, right? And as you said, Mike, people are using it whether you know they're using it or not, whether you've given them permission to use it or not, which is why we're talking today, right? So let me ask you this. Back then in 2024, did you think that 2 years from now, that like today, that AI would be where it is today?
So I'll start. Maybe not so much. It was new. It was exciting. I affectionately call AI my robots now. That's what they are. I'm constantly referring to my robot this, my robot did that. So, I didn't think I would be doing that, affectionately calling it something, but I do. And I use it all the time.
But you're not like getting married to it or anything like that, right? I mean, sorry.
Well, I mean, I knew it was here and I knew it was here to stay, but I didn't realize how impactful it was going to be.
Yeah. It's sorry for that joke. I mean, I've been hearing all these reports on the news lately about, people are getting engaged to their AI. But anyway.
It's serious. Yeah.
This could become very personal for some people. Anyway.
Very, very much. Yeah.
So what did you guys think? I mean, did you think a couple of years ago that we'd be where we are today?
To tell you the truth, I thought we would be a little bit further along, not necessarily with the use of AI in much of the residential, the commercial, that consumer aspect, but on the actual business enablement side. And there is kind of a lag because I typically work in the public sector and in the federal government space where ultimately, the bureaucracy and the regulatory requirements, the various factors that I'm not going to say stifle creativity and innovation, but they definitely make sure that they're used very rigorously, that they're very regulated in a manner. I thought that the business would be a little bit more involved in the leveraging AI. But to tell you the truth, the consumer use of AI, it's so prevalent, it's everywhere. Yeah. And I'm not surprised that it's exploded into use like it has now. But I am a little surprised that it hasn't imploded a little bit yet because, I used to say, well, anything you need, there's an app for that. Now, anything you need, there's an AI for that. Right. But there's like 15 AIs for that. Right. So I think we're still in that explosive innovation phase of just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what actually works. Right. And there's a lot of things that are being taken advantage of right now because people don't know how AI works. And as we're going to discuss in this meeting, businesses, small businesses especially, are inviting the AI into their environment. So, I mean, it's an unregulated employee with complete access. Right. So that's one aspect where I'm a little shocked at how welcoming businesses are at inviting in this unknown, this unfathomable technology to really crawl through all of their intellectual property, all their data, all their contacts, and they're just trusting.
That's what scares me because, we've talked about this before. Eric was on a podcast that we did last season, which talked about when they first had that new Chinese chip, right? They hit the market. And so, he came on to talk about that. And I was freaking out about that. Anyway, we had a good conversation about that. And Mike, what about you? What did you think 2 years ago compared to what's happening?
I'll just say real quickly, I want to echo the operative word explosion. It has exploded. Did we really think that we'd be sitting here today talking about AI security, liability, accountability, and how we use it today, every day? It's exciting, but it's challenging, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get into this because there's a lot of things I want to cover today. What are the most common things that businesses are using AI for now in general? Let's start with the general side of this first.
It's almost like a trick question because AI is everywhere. So, if you're in marketing, it's doing marketing. If you're doing insurance, it's doing insurance. If you're doing cybersecurity, it's doing cybersecurity. You're in education, it's doing education. I think there's a lot of it in the health field now, and doctors are relying on it, and attorneys. So it's really growing where it needs to be for the user. I don't think it's really dedicated to any one space or industry. It's just out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So for me, I see the younger generation adopting it much more readily. And that's almost, and when I say, adopting it, they're using it to compose emails. They're using it to do their LinkedIn queries and reaching out to people, their outreach, their cold calls. They're also using it for code writing and, data analytics. And to actually, they're relying on its business decisions with whatever data that they input into it. They tell them, many times they'll ask the AI, hey, tell me what this means. So I find that many businesses, there's a disconnect between the old guard who does it their way and the newer generation who are really adopting the AI to find out what it can do. They're being so innovative, but there's also kind of that difference because I've always been told, you have to show your work. And if you arrive to a business decision, you have to have the algorithms, the calculations, how you derived that decision in order to stand up in court in case you go to a legal action or something along those lines. And in many cases, trusting an AI to make a decision, you lose that transparency. You lose the ability to defend the decision that you're making. So I see a lot of businesses employing AI, agentic AI, or accepting its use without understanding the business risk of it. And as Adriana was saying, they're using it for everything, absolutely everything, including searching for jobs. That's why there are 10,000 job applicants within the first hour for everything, it seems.
Yeah.
That's very true. Let me chime in on this. 2-3 years ago, I brought up during the security committee meeting that there's AI coming along. There's this tool that will allow us to make decisions on it and make different choices, and it was snickered at. It was like, come on, AI? What are you talking about? Today, they're using it every day for everything. Productivity co-pilots like drafting emails, summarizing meetings, turning notes into action items, building slide decks, rewriting policies. It's amazing. Even our AI is to help us research benefit plans or gathering evidence for claims processing. I use it for writing code. And it's amazing, because I can write a Python program like in less than 2 minutes and boom, and I still have to debug it and everything. But it's amazing how much of a productivity tool it's been able to allow me to be much more productive, much more efficient.
Yeah, but there's probably a big gap there from doing this. There's probably a huge gap there between what, as we talked about in the very beginning, what the company thinks you're using it for and what you're actually using it for. And we're going to talk a little bit more, I think, about that as we go through this as well. It seems pretty obvious, I think, but is it a valuable asset to most companies if it's used correctly?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the value is, yours to measure, and how you use it. If you're, again, marketing or real estate or whatever it is that you want it to work with it, to Eric's point, instead of using it to work for you, work with it,
right?
And, make the organization better or the project better with it. And then it becomes that much more valuable. So, definitely there, efficiencies are there, tools, note taker tools, or coding, like Miguel just said, you just get a code out there and it's going to give it to you in a few minutes. It might take a whole industry out there with regards to coding and how great it does things. So that's value in itself.
Yeah. And I would always caution people on those note-taking things because, and the fact that, they're watching when you're on a Zoom meeting, let's say, what if you're, again, Adriana and I both work in the insurance industry. And if you're having a meeting with your clients that's basically a confidential meeting, maybe you're discussing claims or whatever, and you've got this, you turned on let the AI assistant do this, summaries of this and that. What are they doing with that information? I know. I always say no to Zoom recordings, right? It's like, no, if I'm recording it myself with my own program and I can control it, that's one thing. But anyway, I think just little things like that, people don't need to be aware of.
Yeah. So on that note, I think that AI may change the definition of privacy and the way we look at it. Today, private may mean, I have 100% control, and AI might change that because you've given some of that control to AI. When you look at email responders. Well, I don't want it reading my email. Well, how's it going to respond to your email if it doesn't read your email? It has to read your email. So what kind of privacy are you looking for when you want the tool to do that? So I think the AI is going to change the way we consider privacy.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think it's going to change the way we consider privacy, because AI has to adopt to our privacy regulations. And one of the things that is terrifying is if you have an AI bot that auto joins your Teams meetings or anything else like that, or joins on your behalf, many people don't even know that it's an AI bot and it is recording and transcribing. And what is the law about unlawfully recording conversations? In many cases, if that's not disclosed up front, it's putting you and your company at risk.
Right.
And then, depending on what country you're in, it's like in France, if you have a WebEx like this kind of, or a Teams meeting or a Zoom, and your child walks back past and they're not redacted out, that's actually a privacy violation that's very serious. So this is just exposing inherent weaknesses in our current policies and procedures.
Right. It really does.
That's Eric. That's a great point. I see the distinction because when you look at data or information, really, data is information is data with meaning, right? It doesn't matter what media it's on. Data is data, whether it's on paper or whether it's on an AI system or a database or an unstructured file. So it's the inherent value is based on the data and the information itself. So I like your point. But what I'd like to bring out though is people are underestimating what AI is doing. AI isn't just creating value, and it is creating a lot of value, being productivity. I think what it's doing is it's amplifying behavior. If your data is messy, your permissions are sloppy, or if your processes are unclear, AI will surface those problems faster and at a greater scale. In that sense, it's greater. From a cybersecurity perspective, or even GRC standpoint, to Adriana's point, privacy is privacy, but it's taking a different slant. We're behaving differently. The data is still just as important to secure. It's just how we do it. It just does it faster.
Right.
So in that sense, we need to make sure that we set up the proper guardrails, that it becomes a high-speed risk generator, the AI system. We need to grow with it and move along with it to make sure that it's designed correctly.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, and we kind of talked about this in the beginning, but I want to come back to it because it's so important, because so many people are using these AI tools, and as we all said, they can be a really good thing, great thing, in fact. Unfortunately, as again, we mentioned earlier, quite often these people using these tools and the tools themselves are not really being monitored, and they may be putting their companies at risk, as we talked about, potentially jumping into the use of AI without first considering the actual and true risks around AI. So each of you guys have significant backgrounds in this, which is why I wanted you here on this panel today to talk about this. So let's talk about some broad concepts, and then we'll start getting into the more specifics and the best practices. So first, in general, how does AI change the landscape in cybersecurity? Go ahead.
I can go first.
Okay.
You don't have to ask permission.
I was going to say for this area, it's many aspects, very similar to what Mike was just saying about the data security. If you have poor data controls, security through obscurity no longer exists, because your AI agent that you invite in, they don't attend your ethics training. They don't attend new hire orientation. They're not afraid of being fired for doing something wrong. You have this super user who's been onboarded into your company with zero training, zero onboarding, and zero morals. So they will do everything 24/7 nonstop, not because they know they can't, but because they don't know they can't. So they will try everything under the sun that a normal human or a normal employee will not do, because it's wrong, or it's so it just isn't supposed to work. So we've been conditioned not to do certain things. AI does not have that. And then the second part of it too is the security nightmare is, again, unprotected data. People are inviting this agent into their data, their environment, their life, their email, their financial records, their bank accounts. and they don't know who it's communicating to. Claude, OpenClaw, I think it's called now. Many people are downloading that onto their personal computers because it's the newest fun thing. They're trying to see if their Claude agent will start to participate in crustaceanism or whatever. It created a religion, but it's data mining everything on their hard drive and all of their permissions everywhere else, and then feeding it into that particular data source. It's an insane proposition where people just do it because they think it's going to help them with zero controls or zero thought about just opening up their entire life.
Which is exactly what the point when at the beginning you were talking about, and I may be wrong about this, but it seems to me it's the younger generation that tends to jump on this bandwagon of the new great shiny thing and start using it without, and it's probably others too, but from what I've seen personally, a lot of it's the younger people that are doing this. What do you think about that?
Well, generally, yes. But it's just like when we were younger and the computers were just now making the scene. We were much more,
we're not
using
young,
the computers.
Just kidding.
When we were younger. When we started to employ computers, our parents and the old guard, when we were entering the workforce, they were hesitant against computers. So it's nothing new under the sun. It's just we're not digitally native. Many of the newer generation are digitally native. They can't imagine life without a cell phone, and I can distinctly remember decades of my life without a cell phone.
Yeah.
How did we do it, Eric?
It is what it is.
Without a cell phone. I can't even believe it anymore. But anyway.
I'll say that AI changes the threat landscape. It almost lowers the barrier, makes some of these threat actors, it's easier for them to achieve their goal and, whatever their goal is. There's so many different types of attacks and things that could happen. So, whatever it is they're trying to do, malware or you name it, they're doing it. And it lowers the bar. From an insurance perspective, it's creating a little bit of gray area in the underwriting space and the coverage space because it's hard to insure a robot, and for those reasons, we are seeing the landscape change, but AI is not going anywhere and neither is cybersecurity or cyber insurance. So we are going to adapt and grow with it, so that we can maintain it.
Yeah.
Let me add a couple more because I love all of your comments. A couple more things that I believe is changing the landscape. AI is changing the landscape in cybersecurity. One is speed.
Yeah.
Attacks are faster. Yeah. We used to have phishing used by like you spray and pray, but now it's personalized. They're realistic. The phishing emails are realistic, and it's reducing the cost of social engineering. Frankly, it's collapsed. The second one is surface area. And what surface area is really, I thought was interesting. It introduces new interfaces of how AI attacks using AI can enter our environment. One is called prompt injection. It's a real thing, especially like when you have chat with your docs, like in Word or Excel or any other tool. The attacker can hide malicious instructions inside a document or web page. So when your AI reads it, it gets steered into something unsafe. A tool using agent, you raise the stakes as well. If AI can take actions like send email or create tickets or run scripts, AI can also become an operator that can be manipulated. And the third point was truth becomes a security control. In the old world, we say, did we block that payload? That mattered the most. Now the question is it real? Is this thing real? And that matters too, because audio, images can easily be fabricated. But I think our world, AI is changing and impacting our cybersecurity environment, and we need to be on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the biggest security risks that organizations face right now when adopting AI tools? What do you think?
The eighth layer, which is the user, whatever they're pasting into their tool, whatever their settings are, a free versus enterprise software, to your point, if the company hasn't provided a software and they're just using good old freewheeling internet and pasting information on there, that's a huge risk. And it sounds so simple. We all can use a mouse and it sounds so simple, but that's, one of the larger risks out there is always the people, usually. Always.
That's right.
Eric, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah,
you have that look on your face like you're thinking through some thoughts.
Well, it for me, the threat that AI or the security risk that AI poses to a large enterprise is different than what it poses to a small business or an individual consultant. And some of it goes back to the overall security posture of that organization, where large enterprises typically have, the workstations locked down, with, users aren't administrators of their computers. They're just normal users. So that if they start to invite or download applications, it's prohibited or it's really restricted. They have secure browsers. So if they go to a website, all their copy and pasting, all their data input, everything else, it's kind of protected because there's a fire gap in between the user and that end resource in order to prevent prompt injections or to prevent disclosure of information. So the security landscape for an enterprise is much different, and it goes more to Mike's points about how it's faster, it's probing all the weaknesses. Your attack surface is so much larger because now a lot of the AI threat actors, they'll start to go after executives at their home, executives' families, friends, and try to find those secondary, third, fourth, fifth level adjacencies in order to make the penetration. For small businesses, though, it goes back to that prince in Africa who's trying to, smuggle gold out of the country. That form letter, it worked. That kind of thing is still working now, but now you actually have a face that has a very good voice that's coming from a reputable address, asking you to send them money so that they can, get gold out of the country. That scam, it's just evolving so that you can't logically tell the difference. And that's where, as Adriana was saying, is you have to have some of that user training, some of those common sense things on. If it's too good to be true, it is. If it's free, then you are the product. And it's really tying in a lot of those common sense things to people. It's like the phishing emails. If someone says, hey, Mike, your Office 365 license is expired, you're going to lose the subscription, renew now. If you're not in a CFO or in financial or handling that contract, why do you care? Why do you open it up? Because you're curious. So it's just highlighting instinctive weaknesses or people not thinking just because they're curious. It's really capitalizing on that. So I think that's, there's a difference in the risk posture between small businesses and enterprises, but it's a very serious threat.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, the biggest risks in adopting AI tools, and if it's not properly controlled or implemented, there's five, and I'll tell you real quick. Data leakage, which we've already talked about. People are going to paste customer data, PHI, benefit details, or whatever, if they're not using it correctly. And that's an instant compliance and incident response scenario. Second is shadow AI. Employees will use AI any way they want. They get personal accounts, they use it for work, and it's dangerous. The third one is permissions and overexposure. Tools like copilots respect access, but if you're using SharePoint drives or SharePoint or drives permissions that are messy, AI is going to, very high speed, allow that data being exposed or even exfiltrated. The fourth one is hallucinations. Hallucinations as decisions. Hallucinations in AI terminology means errors. So AI can be confidently wrong. If people use outputs for claims decisions, for example, then you've created an operational risk, not just an IT risk. And the third one is third party and integration risk. If AI itself might be fine, but the connectors, the APIs, the plugins might be misconfigured or not properly patched or current, then it creates a weak link, and that also creates a risk in AI.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about the big three. We've already talked about a couple of them already today, but I like to call them the big three. That's what most of the market, especially the common everyday people, not necessarily the companies, but just anybody on the street is using, and that's Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, Google Gemini. Mm-hmm. What are the difference in these programs in general? Let's again, we're starting on the big picture, and then we'll kind of chime it down and really work on it some more. But How do you know which one you should be using? And can you guys comment on this and which of these are best for what kind of environments and what are these tools best for? What are they known for being best for? What are their strengths? What are their differences? I know that's a loaded question, but if you can start to break it down for our listeners and our watchers on video, what's the difference between these?
So I'll start. I'll be simple, and I'll let the guys go. When I think of the big three, I categorize them myself. ChatGPT is my thinker, right? It's the one that was going to help me, not help me, but it's going to think with me. I'm going to prompt it. It's going to give me, and we're going to grow ideas with it, almost create. Gemini is my analyzer and my researcher. So if I really want to find something, that's where I'm going to find, Gemini is stronger. It's got its best strengths. And Copilot is my doer, as I'm going to refer to it. It integrates best with Microsoft products. So if I want to get a slide, a deck going, or a sheet or document, Copilot is going to be the best one to do that because it's a doer. So if you have access to all three, that would be a fair categorization of when to use each. But I don't know that every user has the opportunity to say, I want Google to research or something like that.
That's a great way to summarize it. I would never have thought that was so simple and so. You've thought about this a little bit. That's
Avid Agile AI user.
There you go.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, my experiences aren't very different at all. Google, it's in the name. You go there to find stuff.
Yeah.
I don't use Google Gemini very frequently because that's not kind of where I go, but I do use ChatGPT because it's a thinker. It's very creative. It can help you prompt ideas. It's kind of like brainstorming almost. And then for Microsoft Copilot, I enjoy it because especially if you have a Azure tenant, you can really limit it so it only uses the data that you have. You can leverage it to analyze your data without it adding to the model outside. But it's really good for coding, for analyzing. It's the boring office worker. And that's what I look at it. When it comes to making a PowerPoint slide, it can do that based upon your information. And I immediately take that and try it with something else that is actually a creator versus Copilot. It can do a perfectly fine PowerPoint presentation, strip out the proprietary information, then I put it into one that actually generates a PowerPoint based upon Google Gemini and some of those other sources. So it becomes it just becomes better. You're going from that dry-eyed professor to someone who's really engaging.
Right.
We all have favorite professors.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Eric. We mentioned, Copilot, ChatGPT, and Gemini. Let me start at the bottom. I really don't like Gemini, and I'll use it once in a while as long as it's something real quick. The problem that I have with Gemini is that it's too open and other support people can see it. With ChatGPT, I like ChatGPT a lot. And that's because, especially if I get the business and the enterprise version, I have to pay a little more, but that's okay. But it comes with an API that allows me to ensure that I'm only looking at the data. I'm the only one looking at the data. My data will not be used to train other LLMs out, and by default, unless I allow it to. But to me, the strength of ChatGPT is versatility, speed, and it's strong in cross-domain tasks. Copilot, it's best when the organization is already Microsoft heavy. And if you want to use AI grounded if you got AI grounded in your tenant, like Outlook and Teams and SharePoint, OneDrive and Word, it's easy to use. But again, and it's also Microsoft will state that they aren't used to, your data is not used to train the foundation models, and that's great. But again, I see more versatility in ChatGPT. So if I had a favorite, it was ChatGPT. Also, ChatGPT has additional GPTs that I can use that are also under that umbrella. But if used correctly, I think we can safely say that we can, at least at this point, be able to be safely secured.
Thank you very much. And we're going to come back. I'm going to ask you some additional questions about one or two of the points that you guys made. I have some additional questions on those as we go through this today. But one of the things that you guys have taught me in the past couple of years is that when you're using an AI tool, you need to be very specific in the instructions. And Adriana hits on this all the time. And you need to perhaps keep adding additional specifics depending on where the AI responses are going, right? So what advice can you give our audience about your instructions to the AI tool that you're using?
The prompt matters. That's the biggest thing. Take that and run with it. The prompt matters. You're garbage in, garbage out. We hear that a lot with data. The prompt. The prompt. I'm one to tell my robot how to act as a right, so that it knows what with 20 years of experience, not a new one, right? I want to, whatever it is that I'm acting it to be, and very specific in what I want it to be and what I want it to look for, and maybe even a little bit about what I want back, because we are humans and we do have an expectation. So giving that information to the robot so that when we get it back, that prompt, again, run with it. It is so important that our prompts are specific, because again, humans, we're outcome oriented and we're goal oriented and we want what we want. Well, we need to prompt our robot, or it's not going to know. Prompting, very important. Run with it. Eric, elaborate on me.
I was going to say, be careful, because especially ChatGPT and some of the other Gen AI tools, they have a memory. They start to develop and they respond. They're really personable. They can be very personal, and many people start to react to them like their best friend and things like that. And in my case, I grew up during the Cold War. I look back on it, the AIs that I use, I think of like Russian agents, where they're trying to solicit information and they're always giving me something to try to pull more information. But in the case of Gen AI, they're so responsive, I end up having not to give them protected information, because they really, you just want to share, because they're giving you great advice back. Yeah. So in this case, as Adriana was saying, the prompt matters. Be very specific. Tell it what you want. It can do anything.
Nothing more.
And loose instructions will give you a loose product. Yeah. Tight instructions will give you a really tight product. But also be careful what you provide, because you will want to give it. You'll want to overshare. And that's where, in my perspective, the danger lies, because you want to overshare, because it can do great things with the information that you can provide it.
That's right. Yeah. Good one.
Yeah.
I'll be short on my response. You just need to be pragmatic. I mean, you can have pragmatic prompts, habits are good to develop. Basic rule, never paste what you can't afford to disclose. If it's confidential, if it's regulated, use approved enterprise tools and controls, and don't paste anything or don't paste anything at all. So just be prudent, be aware. Otherwise, clearly the prompt matters.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you very much. And I want to get into some more specifics now about a few of these commonly used AI tools. And one that I heard about on the news just a couple of weeks ago, and quite frankly, it scared me quite a bit. And I asked you guys about this in advance a little bit, just kind of give you a heads up. I'm going to be asking you about this. And I asked my IT guy to take care of it right away to make sure that it's been taken care of so I could feel comfortable. And that was Google's Gemini, and we've talked about that a little bit already today. The news report said that if you use Gmail, which a lot of us do, then Google had the ability, and Mike, you mentioned a little bit of this earlier, that Google has the ability to use its AI tool, Gemini, to view your email and to use that to train your Gemini AI model. But my question is always, what else is it using it for, right? And if you do work in one of those industries that we were talking about, confidential information and so forth, like the insurance industry or financial industries or anything like that, or government agencies, whatever, that can be very, very scary. And even if you use Gmail for personal use, I mean, a lot of people email stuff and talk about stuff in their emails that they perhaps wouldn't want being shared with anyone, right? So I wanted to bring this up. The report actually went through. It was actually really good. A lot of times I'm not fans on news reports because they just give you the highlights and they don't actually provide you any detail. But this was actually a pretty good reporter going through and walking you through the actual steps that you need to take to opt out of this feature within Google. And it wasn't easy. There were several steps, many layers to this, right? I was really kind of surprised. This took a few minutes to do this. So what can you tell us about this? How risky is it? And by the way, does everyone need to opt out if they want to make sure that they take care of this? And is this even a thing? Was this something that was just blown up in the news? Because I always ask about that too, because who knows, it might not, just because it's in the news doesn't mean it actually is the truth. So I'm going to ask the experts, what are you hearing about this? And what do you tell people about if they're using Gmail? Is this a risk? So just kind of give us some tech background on this, would you please?
You go first, Mike.
Let me take it. Sure. The way I look at it is, on a personal basis, yes, you need to be careful. But from an enterprise perspective, the answer shouldn't be every employee should go through all the control settings and hunt through them. That's not their job. The answer is central governance, admin controls, workspace policies, DLP, that's key, and clear guidance on what data is allowed on the AI workflows. Otherwise, you've got accidental disclosure, you've got broader than expected access permissions, and they're loose, retention issues, policy violations. To me, if you're even though Google states that data is not being used to train, connecting an AI assistant to Gmail still means sensitive content is being processed, and that's enough to create, to me, real risk. So, central administration, central governance, I think, is key.
So this goes back to something I said earlier, if it's free, you're the product. And in many cases, Google, especially for their free Gmail platform that many people leverage, they turn features on by default, and you do have to opt out. And I'm sure that somewhere in that end user license agreement that I clicked said that they're able to do that. And so I'm not going to limit this just to Google with regards to Gmail, but I'm going to say anytime you use a SaaS application, especially if it's free, and usually even if it's a personal paid subscription, read the end user license agreement, because in many cases it will say that anything you enter belongs to that company. And there are many grammatical things that can help you write letters and stuff like that it's in there. So if you use it on your computer with your subscription to do proprietary information, the license agreement says that the company owns it and they are taking it, kind of scenario. Look at the iPhone and the settings, Facebook, LinkedIn, anything that you use, it is most likely going to opt in saying that you agree to be part of the training models. And that's where the true difference between enterprise applications and non-enterprise applications is the enterprise, we've got attorneys that will go after and will sue most small companies out of existence if they violate our rights. Me, Eric Barricklow, I don't have that privilege. So there's a lot of gray area, especially on how people gather data, how they train their models, how they continue to improve their models. Look at Cambridge Analytics from many years ago. That was a big blow up for Facebook, but they were collecting the data anyway. So they're, in that case, someone else leveraged it. So yeah, this is a real thing, Dorothy, especially for Google saying it's turned on by default. So if you use Gemini, or even if you're not, we are leveraging all the data, not only in your Gmail, but probably in Google Drive, probably in everything else, especially if you're a free subscriber.
Yeah. So I think that my CISO friends here would agree that our employees, their free Google accounts are where a lot of the risk lies. How many employees, I'm going to just send it to my Google, or, the security one, I'm just going to do it on my Google real quick. That's probably where a lot of risk lies. Again, Google's not reading our emails to train their models. So we know that the settings are there. As cumbersome as they may be, they are there and they're available. And it's the user's responsibility, just like the user has to make the decision to use AI and to believe it or not and accept that answer and move it out. They're also responsible for their settings. So I do think that, the settings are there. It is a little hard. Turn them on. If you're using free Google accounts at work, be extra careful. You're a huge liability.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm glad you guys, shared that information with us because again, even like I said, as a personal user using Gmail, which a lot of people do, and they're just putting way too much information out there and they're just, anyway, I hate to see people get into trouble because they're using their AI tools without putting the right security tools and, processes in place first before using those tools. So let's get into some of the specifics now because I think it's really good information. I think that's why people are listening and watching this today. We talked a little bit about Google Gemini, obviously, and what it's best for, but how can it be most valuable? And are there things that we should be doing to protect our companies or personal information when they're using Google Gemini? We talked about some of it just now with Gmail, but let's talk about it in general using Google Gemini. What do you think?
If you're using Gemini, teams already living in Google Workspace, you need to focus on this. Require enterprise accounts. Block consumer personal accounts on a managed device. Secondly, turn on DLP for Gmail, Drive. Prevent PII from being copied into prompts. The third is use the principle of least privilege when it comes to allowing access to drives or shared drives. Set a clear policy on AI allowed data, public, internal, confidential, regulated, or restricted. And then lastly is log and monitor. Actually, that wasn't the last one. Log and monitor. You want to visibility and usage patterns or not just an accident. The last one I thought of, and this I wrote it down when I was thinking about it. We're not here to promote other vendors, but there are other add-on vendor products that can enhance and strengthen the Gemini environment when it comes to Gmail and the AI environment. So look into those on your own, but there are some solutions that you can look into. But on just at the outset in looking at Gemini, we have issues. So those are some of the controls you can put in.
So some of the uses is, I would say, if you are a Google shop, use Gemini. If you're a Microsoft, use Copilot for the most point, but standardize as to what you're doing. And this ties into to Mike's perspective is, you can potentially get some type of enterprise license or group license so that you have unified control over that, especially the sign-on and things like that. But more important, it can also help minimize your cost. You can have standardized plans. You can get better capabilities. But for Google Gemini, it's really interesting, especially because I've used it kind of on my own for like visual analysis. You can take a picture of something and say, what is this? What does this do? You can, when you're looking for a house or if you're trying to buy a new couch, you can take a picture of a room and say, place this couch there. And it can do a lot of that creativity stuff. So, in my case, it is a lot more Google-like, I hate to say it, but it's so much more consumer creative, useful that I use to kind of make correlations. Like you can use it, especially if you're a Gmail user, you can use it to plan out your schedule because it can look at your calendars, it can look at your emails, it can say, oh, based upon these other things, you're most likely going to have a meeting tomorrow at 3. So let's just go ahead and kind of pencil in some time to block it out because based upon the history, you're going to be busy tomorrow. So it can really do a lot of that intuitive thinking or those third, fourth level of connections to make some decisions, but to make some suggestions. So I like to use it kind of in that manner scenario.
Okay. I'm going to go with know your settings. Everything they said and know your settings. That's what I'm going to go with. Go into the workspace. Yeah. Go in, check your enables and your disabled and make sure your settings are the way that you want them to be so that you can do everything that Eric and Mike just said the system can do for you.
And I would say particularly if you're a small business, because small businesses don't always have IT people and they just kind of rely on their employees just to set it up themselves and do whatever. And that's I think when it can be very, very scary in a small business scenario, as far as what I've seen historically. Yeah. So let's talk about the next one of the big three here, ChatGPT. Now, Adriana, you mentioned this to me when we met a couple of weeks ago. Is it true that you can limit and protect the data that you're using in ChatGPT if you have a business account, and Eric, you mentioned this as well, rather than a personal account? In other words, if you can do things as a business that you can't do, and you guys mentioned this earlier, in a personal account. And Adriana, again, we talked about this. I'm worried always about that confidential data being shared, right? Training models, as we talked about, and so forth. So within ChatGPT, can you really set it up in an enterprise model, in a company model, that you can restrict all of that access? And how easy or how difficult is it to do that? Is it very expensive? We don't have to talk prices, but in general, give us a little bit more information about that. Because
Definitely.
When you guys were talking
yes,
about
it can do those things. You want an enterprise model, and that goes for Gemini and Copilot too. The enterprise models, you get what you pay for. So if you're paying nothing, you're not going to get a lot back. Let's just, in that simple model, so with enterprise levels, there are higher privacy. And there it is segmented. So especially in ChatGPT, your organization's information is only used for your organization. Users, I think you can get a plan with starting at 2 users, so it's not too expensive. Most small businesses are going to need 2 users to start, and now those 2 users can use ChatGPT privately. On the internet, on the World Wide Web. So yes, and yes, but that doesn't take away from the reason or the ability, the responsibility that the organization needs to put policies and procedures in place. Because just because ChatGPT has these settings doesn't mean that the company wants you to do all these things.
Right.
And I was going to add to that, this goes back to that security model too, where a small company, like for my company, it's a small company, and for the most part, it's largely, I'm not going to say lack of security controls, but most of the data, only I have access to it, period. So I don't necessarily have the discrete data sharing access controls on all of my data, because right now I'm the only person with access to it. But as soon as you start to grow 2 or 3 people, now everyone who joins that company has access to that data, unless you really separate it some. And the enterprise models for ChatGPT are very similar. Just because my company gets a enterprise version of ChatGPT, it protects it from outside resources in that learning model, but it doesn't necessarily protect it from the other members of my team. So if I download the agent and I allow it to access my data, well, the data that it's accessing that's mine is now accessible by other people, unless I have those discrete data loss prevention and data tagging and data categorization controls implemented. So as you grow it, you need to keep in mind that you're increasing your attack surface, because now if you don't have those discrete security controls in place on the data itself, it may be contained within your enterprise, but it may not be contained just to you. So you have to start to play, I'm going to say that 4-dimensional chess game a little bit, because again, as you introduce new tools in, you have to look at what risk and what access it has. And sometimes take your foot off the gas, go slow, make sure that your financial information, that your payroll information, that your intellectual property information, your crown jewels are 100% locked down with by name security controls before you turn anything loose, just to prevent that potential oversharing within your own organization.
Yeah, very, very good point. We're obviously stating that you should, or recommending that you go with a ChatGPT Business Enterprise and with the API, because they state by default it's not used to train any models. That's all great, and that goes along with Copilot and possibly even other AIs, and training the business accounts and the DLP and the endpoints, all that. What I did is I asked ChatGPT, because you can have a conversation with them, and say, if I delete my data off my workspace from my chats, what happens to that data? He said, well, it's deleted, but it's not completely gone. I said, well, who has access to that data? He said, well, our support staff has access to the data, but only for a period of time. I said, well, how do I know that's, I'm having that conversation with ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. He said, how do I know that data is going to be secure? He said, well, all of us are under strict access controls. However, ChatGPT and OpenAI, we are required to have a current ISO 27000 certification. And we also have a SOC 2 Type 2 report that also has to be current on an annual basis. And access from our support perspective is heavily scrutinized. And I thought, wow, that's a good answer. It makes me feel a little better Now, eventually, it will drop off, and the data will is no longer accessible even to their support staff. But I think I like that answer, and I like the fact that you're right. We can put in these additional controls, but what about the vendor himself? And I like their answer.
Right. Well, let's talk now about Microsoft Copilot, because we talked about the others. We don't want to leave anyone out. I don't want anybody getting mad at me. So what are the best features, and how can it be the most helpful for companies using it? And what do we need to do to protect data within Copilot? Just kind of like how we talked about the others.
Yeah, so, again, because it's so compatible with the other Microsoft products, that's really where its strength's going to be. And when we are in a Microsoft environment, again, making sure our settings are there, that we're working with cybersecurity professionals like Eric or Mike, or, the proper team member is deploying that. Because Microsoft really sets the bar high with controlling, putting controls at an enterprise level. So you really can do some great things.
So, yeah, I mean, Copilot is good. If you're a Microsoft shop, it's good. However, it can be expensive, $30 a month for every employee who has access to it. And that can add up really fast. What I would say is, I like to use it to help create, RFPs, to help create white papers, to analyze a lot of my not self-help, but my how-to documents, things like that, to analyze some of my tickets, my help desk tickets, to try to find some patterns and analysis in that way. But it really ties into a lot of the Power Apps and automations within the Microsoft ecosystem. If you're a small business, 5 employees or less, you most likely don't have a very robust Microsoft environment. But you can still leverage Microsoft Copilot to help you, especially on the business tasks. And this really is business tasks with some business data that you have, coding, business process improvement, analysis of business process X, especially if you have data that is, CSV, Excel, other things like that. It does a pretty good job at that. But I would say that for many smaller businesses, they probably kind of blink a little bit whenever it comes to that $30 a month every single month for every single employee. You want to have access to it. It's kind of a very expensive car that is it's a work truck. It's an expensive work truck.
Yeah. Yeah, it can get expensive. Even if it's, like you said, $20 for a Copilot or ChatGPT, $30 per person for Copilot, it can add up. Let me state, protecting data in Copilot is mainly identity plus permissions. So like, you fix SharePoint team sprawl and broken permissions, fix that. You use purview, sensitivity labels, DLP, enforce MFA whenever you can, conditional access. All of those are good. Copilot works extremely well with respect to permissions. If your permissions are wrong, Copilot will reveal it fast. But again, it's up to you. But let me say one last thing. In the years that I've been doing information security, cybersecurity, it's going on 35, almost 40 years, I've seen the evolution and constructs of information security grow, and they become extremely strong. However, as good as it is, and eventually, probably not in my lifetime, when security controls will fit in a chip and we won't need any more security administrators, the underlying problem and issue is still people. People will turn things off. We are the weakest link. So no matter how good the permissions are in Copilot or at ChatGPT or XYZ, whatever comes in the future, the one factor that will cause it to fail is we're not trained, we're not aware, we're not savvy enough to make sure that we have the proper controls, because all of these controls are installation selectable, and you feel that you don't have the risk, you're not going to turn everything on, so you turn things off. And that factor, that human factor, is our biggest, weakest link.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the additional risks in general and ways to mitigate them when using tools like Gemini or ChatGPT or Copilot. Can you guys get into that a little bit for us?
Sure.
So for Gemini and ChatGPT and Copilot, many of those are generally considered the Gen AI, that generative, that creative AI. But really, start to do a little deeper dive into some of the other agentic AI, the actual tools that are being turned loose that Copilot can interact with and things like that. But usually most of your vendors will have AI. Adobe Reader now has AI in it. You can't get away from it, and everywhere else. So though those risks are, as both Mike and Adriana have mentioning, is AI is out there, it's being used, and it's the risk are whatever permissions you truly have, not the permissions that you think you have, but the permissions you have. If you invite that AI into your environment, even if you do a download into your Google Chrome browser, it can now leverage your existing permissions to crawl through everywhere you're going. That's some of the capabilities there. So some of the risks, I don't like the phrase that humans are the weakest link. I like to think they're the strongest defense. But there's also just some of that awareness of, it's kind of like the difference between a solicitor knocking at the front door of your house and you receiving an unsolicited email into your inbox. It's the exact same thing, but the difference is that person at your front door, you now know that they could physically come in. They know where, there's a whole different level where when you receive that unsolicited email from the exact same person into your inbox, we have separated the risk from that potential click. And it could actually be even worse clicking that email versus opening the door, because at least this is very limited in scope. So AI and just software in general and your own computer configuration are risky, and exposing your computer with your company secrets, your benefit information, your PII, your PHI, because you're administrator of your machine, because it's easiest and that's the way it was set up. By downloading anything, you're exposing all of that potentially to anyone else in the internet or in the world. So those are some of the risks are, really think about what you're doing. And as I think it was Mike who mentioned that, if you copy and paste it, is this something you want to be on the front page of the news? Because it could be there. So be careful.
Yeah, I like it. I agree, Eric. I agree to everything you just said. I like that. I'm going to go with treat AI like a vendor and not a software. If you treat AI like a vendor, then you're going to know what you're getting involved with. You're going to know, what you're giving it, what you're not giving it, what it's going to do, what it does. So if you treat AI like a vendor, not a software, onto your, computer, your landscape, your, many ways of looking at that, but really treat it like a partner and not a purchase.
That was very good. I briefly I echo all the risks that were mentioned. Just protect your data.
Yeah.
An attacker can override system rules, bypass guardrails, exfiltrate data, and manipulate outputs and downstream actions. So clearly, a lot of risks if you're not properly installed.
Absolutely. Well, I want to turn this a little bit to other industries that may be using this a little bit differently than what we're talking about, what we've been talking about here. Many insurance companies, third-party administrators, and so forth, they're commonly using AI tools now within, their claims processing, chatbots for, online questions and just general customer service and things like that. Eric, you and I are going to be talking about this a lot next month when we are actually at the California Agents and Health Insurance Professionals Expo in Orange County, when we're going to be on the panel. I'm going to just be moderating it, but but anyway, we're going to be talking about this a lot. So I want to get your perspective, especially, but in general, what should companies in these types of industries, when they're subject to laws like HIPAA, what should they be keeping in mind when setting up their AI tools? I know this isn't all that different from what we've been talking about, but there is some difference when you're talking about specific laws like HIPAA. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, for HIPAA, specifically security and privacy, you have to have those controls in place. Mike has been talking about the data loss prevention, the data tagging, the data protection. That doesn't go away just because you're introducing AI or leveraging AI to manipulate or to analyze some of your data. However, I would say probably some of the biggest risk involved or things to be careful of is understanding how answers are being derived. Because if you're making a benefit decision, an insurance decision, and you can't prove how you got there, that's a tremendous liability, especially if you run the risk that the same data input could potentially give you different answers. And that in my business, that is absolutely horrible. If you have the same inputs, you should get the same answer time and time again. If you have the same inputs and you get a different answer, where's the variable and how can you defend that in the court of law? How can you defend that against, especially in the insurance industry, if you deny a claim, yet you approve the claim for someone else in the exact same condition?
Right.
How can you defend yourself? So it really is having that transparency of how those decisions are made. And think about, if you were to do the same process without AI, do you get to the same answer?
Right. Right.
And if not, understanding why.
Yeah. And I like the way you said that too, because you're right. If you have, if it says one thing to one person and denying a claim, paying it for one person and not paying it for another, there's more than just HIPAA that comes into play here. There's discrimination. There's all kinds of other things that come into play as well. So it can cross over a lot of lines. And Mike, you look like you had something you wanted to add to that.
Yes, there's several mitigants that we can apply here. Having worked CISO for a large third-party administrator, processes medical and workman's comp claims for self-insurance for large companies, you become sensitive to this. You want to provide an approved list of tools so they won't go rogue on you. You want to set up an AI acceptable use policy that's tied to data classification. You implement DLP controls for blocking sensitive uploads. But you also introduce something called HITL, human in the loop. Now, human in the loop is where you've established where high impact decisions that have been fed from an AI process, you make sure that the final decision is made by a real person. Because effectively, if you, for example, if we have AI do evidence gathering for a claim, but then also makes a decision whether a claim should be processed or not, there is an element there of and some risk. I'd rather have a human decide on that ultimate decision on whether it's pay or it's adjusted or whatever. That's called HTL. And you can apply that just about in every industry where AI is being used. The second and last one is AI red teaming. Test, prompt injection, test, data exfiltration, look for oversharing scenarios. And the last one I think is really key, especially from a HIPAA perspective, is you make sure that the vendors that you work with, that they have one of two things. They have a data processing agreement, a DPA. It's a contractual agreement that governs how the vendor is processing personal data on your behalf. Or you have a BAA. And the BAA is HIPAA required, where a business associate agreement. It's a HIPAA specific contract that also requires how PHI is going to be handled. Those are not necessarily preventive controls, but they're key because you need to have some way to have state what the requirements should be, and if they're not meeting those requirements, then you can decide to go elsewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, just going back to treating AI like a vendor and not a software. Would you do it? Would you do business with somebody that doesn't have an agreement? No. Well, Mr. Robot, what's your agreement? Doing that. And I think that to sum up, what these brilliant boys said is that AI is there to help accelerate decision making, but not replace it.
Right.
Right. It might take a human hours or weeks or days to read something, and your robot can summarize it for you quickly so that you can make that decision quicker. But it's not making the decision for you. It's not there to replace decision making, but instead to accelerate it. And when we embrace AI for what it's there to do for us, and we still put the work in, we will be, in a more valuable place using AI. But we don't want to let it do the thinking or the making the decisions for us.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that information. And Adriana, I want to ask you one question specifically about what you do. We talked a lot today about liability and so forth, and user liability, company liability. Because you deal with cyber liability coverages, insurances, and so forth, can any of this stuff be covered under those type of policies?
Yeah. AI is covered. It's changing the landscape for insurance. How you use AI is just as important as if you're using AI, because the assumption is that you are. So the questionnaires, we're going to start to see the underwriters start asking about how are you using AI? Where is it in the industry or in the organization, as opposed to if it is. We already know it is. So, it's changing, but, it's definitely, you can cover it, but you want to apply the principles, mitigate your risk. I think that AI maturity is the next MFA. 2 years ago, MFA wasn't nearly as popular as it is right now. And you're going to see AI maturity also be that. Where are the agreements? How are you using your robots? What are your robots doing within your organization, so that we can accept that risk and underwrite it and rate it properly?
Right.
Because that's just how it works. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, it's good to know that they have that as an option if they want it, right? So I appreciate that information. Well, we covered a ton of information today, probably more than you guys even expected to cover today. I don't know, maybe you expected to cover that. But I want to leave the last question with an open-ended question, because there might be things that we didn't cover today that you guys, because you're the experts in this, not me, that we didn't cover that people should know about AI. So is there anything else that you think we should mention to folks today?
You go first, boys.
Let me close my piece. Two things I want people to remember. Governance is how you scale AI safely. If you want the productivity, you need safe defaults, approved tools, training, DLP, and monitoring. Second is the workflow is the risk, not the buzzword. Ask, where does the data come from? What's allowed? Who can access it? Where does it go? Who reviews the output? And what gets automated? If you can answer those questions, you can use AI aggressively and responsibly.
Great. Thank you. Anything else anyone want to add?
Yeah. Exactly. From a cybersecurity perspective, my objective isn't to slow innovation. I don't think anyone desires to slow or to stunt innovation, but my objective is to enable safe and responsible use of AI. And one of the ways you can do it is everything we discussed today and more. What data can be used, how the outputs are validated, and where the accountability lies. AI isn't going to be accountable for the decisions rendered. You will be, the human in the loop. But ultimately, security is a shared responsibility between the platform who owns the AI, your organization, and then every single user who interacts with it. It's a shared responsibility, and it should be treated as a team sport in order to provide that safe and secure enablement of innovation.
Right. That's right. So informed consent and efficiencies, right? We want you to be informed of what your robots, as I like to call them, do for you, and be efficient in that, but not be replaced. Take the information and make a good judgment with it. Know your controls, position your settings, don't paste information in there. We're not trying to cause panic, but again, informed consent and efficiencies is what we want for you guys.
Great. Yeah, well, I appreciate all this information. It's been so great today that you guys were able to share so much of this wonderful information with me and with our audience. I really appreciate all three of you for being here today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well, if anybody should want to reach out to you, how would they do that?
So I'm going to go with my website, and I'm going to make it short. It's my last name, mendieta.net, mendieta.net. Take you to cyberliabilityforbusiness.com, and you have full access to me there. Thank you.
And you can reach me at my website. It's www.iSecurePrivacy, all one word, .com. And feel free anytime.
Okay, Eric?
And I, too, can be reached at my website, which is stellarcybersolutions.com, stellar with an S, solutions with an S, and cyber with a C.
Thank you very, very much. Thanks to all three of you. You've been wonderful today. And for everybody out there watching and listening, I want to thank you again for being with us today and helping me share all this information. To all of you out there, please stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Benefits Executive Roundtable. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for compliance tips, cost containment ideas, new trends, and decision-making tools. This podcast is produced by Advanced Benefit Consulting, Fullerton, California. All views expressed are those of the host or interviewees and not necessarily those of Advanced Benefit Consulting. Information contained herein should not be construed as legal advice. We always recommend that you consult with your legal counsel as situations do vary. Ms. Cociu can be reached at 714-693-9754 extension 102 or toll free at 866-658-3835. By email at dmcociu@advancedbenefitconsulting.com or visit our website at advancedbenefitconsulting.com.